he got in. But
Good evening,
I
everyone.
needed it.
Thank you for being here today. This is a rare occurrence in the city of Westfield when you get the school board and the city council and leadership from both ends together to have an open and frank conversation about the state of the city and impacts on the schools. So I really appreciate you joining us today. We're going to be merging two different traditions in terms of how meetings run. What is consistent for both of us is that we stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Following that, please remain standing. We're going to do a moment of silence per the tradition of the schools. And then at the city, we say a prayer. So I ask you to just remain standing through both of those, and then we'll get into the meeting. So if you would, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pastor Lily, go ahead.
Let us pray. Holy God, tonight we pause to give you great thanks for the joy of celebrating a new year that has great new possibilities, for the joy of celebrating all that you give to us. And so we thank you tonight, God, for the joy of life, for the goodness of life together as families and as a community. And we thank you for the goodness of living in this growing city of Westfield that has so many things available to us. We thank you for providing gifted city leaders who serve with intelligence and discernment. We thank you, too, for the excellent quality of education that is afforded to our children in our city. We thank you for all of the superior teachers who have the joy, well, at least most of the time, of teaching our engaging and gifted students. We thank you for the dedicated school leaders who must daily deal with and respond to the needs of existing educational needs here. And yet we know with the growing number of people in our city, it poses different challenges, God. Different challenges than being in an area that is in decline or is static, as are others in our state. With growth comes new and different ideas among us as leaders, as parents, and as community members. And so tonight, I pray for your greatest wisdom for all who make decisions in this city. I pray that you would give them a bright vision for the greater good of all involved. And I pray that as we address the issues that are resulting from growth, that you, God, would guide us all to speak as ones who are well-informed and who resolve to work together, not apart, to benefit this place, Westfield, Indiana, a place that we have the great joy of calling our home. I pray this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
I appreciate that. So let me set the stage for this meeting just so everybody knows why are we doing this and how is this meeting going to operate here over the next hour or two. This really started, first off, when Dr. Atha took over as school superintendent. He and I, we meet regularly. We have been meeting regularly even before he took office, took the role he's filling now. And we try to be collaborative in everything we do. It kind of started, quite frankly, with the comprehensive plan that's going to be released here very shortly. From day one, Dr. Atha and his team has had a big seat at the table to help make decisions in terms of growth that supports the schools and what they're trying to accomplish as well. I know for many, many years, I felt like we were playing catch-up in this city. Oftentimes, the schools were crippled with decisions the city was making that didn't always have their best interest in mind. But we're here now, and we're not going to look back and point the fingers at people. We're just going to try to deal with the hand we've all been dealt tonight. This meeting came to fruition after I attended an executive session with the school board leadership and their demographer. He shared some information, quite frankly, that shocked me. It was information that certainly wasn't something I expected to hear or that was a narrative that we were operating out of at the city. We'll talk more about that later, But I felt like, hey, we need to have a meeting. We need to have it in public. And the community needs to hear this message because we got to make some decisions moving forward to ensure that collaboratively, the city and the schools are moving forward together. I have said this since taking office. I believe our schools are our greatest asset and certainly our biggest driver of economic development. Nobody wants to live in a city with a bad school district. Nobody wants to move their businesses to a community that has bad school districts. So we want to protect what we have built here, which is a phenomenal school district, and I compliment all those to my right who have had a major hand in that. So that's where we're going. This is not a public engagement. We're not taking questions. It's purely an informational period. You'll see a lot of questions being asked from both my council and Dr. Ather's school board, and we want to allow them to learn and educate themselves and be armed with the right information to move forward as a city. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Ather, to say a few words and take it from here.
All right, thank you, Mayor Willis. Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2026. First, I appreciate what Scott said. And second, just thank you to our community. As a school district, we employ 1,400 people. We serve over 7,000 families, and we approach almost 11,000 students. So obviously we touch all aspects of our community, but we also feel the support, appreciation, and pride that our community has in the district. So thank you. And so one of the things in this conversation, as we go back and forth and people talk about the comprehensive plan, growth, enrollment, we work this, both the administration, but more importantly, the Board of School Trustees works very diligently to be intentional and strategic behind the scenes to make sure we're out in front of those things that are important to us, especially master planning right now. And we, quite frankly, we can respond to anything if we have a plan and we're really connected and we collaborate. And so that's why we want to be here this evening, is because we think it's in the best interest of the community for us to collaborate. Our resources come from our taxpayers. 60% of our taxpayers do not have students in our schools, right? And so it's really important for us to engage and to be connected to what's going on in the city. But we also have our own mission. So we're going to talk a little bit tonight. Specifically, we're going to drill down to school enrollment and how growth impacts enrollment, or maybe some misconceptions in how growth impacts enrollment. And what I want to ask when this is over, that we always follow the data and not maybe our assumptions. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Jerry McKibben, who is our longtime demographer. He does demographic studies throughout the state of Indiana, all over the country, but is well known in Indiana and knows the state of Indiana very well. And so we've asked Jerry just to simplify. He did a study recently to really just focus on how growth impacts enrollment. And so, Jerry, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, John. Mayor Willis, ladies and gentlemen of the board, council. I've been told I'm going to try to do this in 21 minutes. That'll be a record in itself. People in the audience, I'm going to work off of this screen here so I can see it. I can't see that one. So, two things I want to do before I start, very, very important. One, we calculate forecasts. We don't calculate projections. Projections where you take a variable, usually year-to-year survivorship, second, third to fourth grade, over a 4 or 5 year period, create an algorithm, and use that to project into the future. Very quick, simple, easy, cheap. Till the mid-1990s, all you had in the way of enrollment forecasting or any kind of projections. The problem with the projection is it's almost never correct, because the only way a projection can be correct is what's happened over the last 5 years replicates itself exactly the next 5 or 10 years. I don't know about anybody here. I don't see the last 5 years again in my lifetime. A forecast is different. It's a two-step procedure. The first thing we do is we create a fertility, mortality, and migration program specific to each elementary attendance area. Use 2020 census data, local building, planning, home data, public records, anything we lay our hands on, and do a full population forecast, 0 to 4 to 85 plus, male and female. The results of that population forecast drives the enrollment forecast. So it's not your current and past demographic trends that's driving it, it's your current and future demographic dynamics. There's everything built specifically for Westfield Washington. The second and the most important thing, don't let Daphne, Alabama fool you. You'll notice I do not have a southern accent. I was born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Went to Northwest Allen schools, got my doctorate in Bowling Green, Ohio. My doctoral dissertation was on Indiana demographics, and I've done 150 districts in this state, about 3,000 around the country in the last 35 years. So, yes, no, and Westfield, Washington for about 15, I think now too. Anytime you're doing a forecast, you have to have assumptions. These are broad socioeconomic, demographic parameters that you use to build your fertility, mortality, and migration models. Now, I don't want to go through all of them, but I do want to go through what I call the top 4. And what just happens to come up on the list here is the rate of transfer students. This is the state of Indiana. Indiana is the only state in the country that has interdistrict transfers, charters, vouchers, homeschool, and virtual all going on at the same time. It's kind of chaotic out there. You cannot do enrollment forecasting in the state of Indiana without examining what not only the local, regional, state transfer policies are. We assume in these forecasts that you are going to have negative 600 transfer students annually over the next 10 years. If that number seems high for your neighboring district, Hamilton Southeast, that number is over 2,000 negative. So it's how many are going public to public and then public to private. Now, one of the problems is we assume 600 in our forecast. We just got 2 weeks ago the new 2025 fall transfer numbers, and you're sitting at 673. So it's already up a little bit. So that's a negative on the forecast. So I might be running a tad high because your transfers are up. A little bit more to non-public, a little bit higher going to public. But we assume that number. Second one is there's no building moratorium within the district. We've been putting this in all of our assumptions for now 30 years now because it has a devastating impact on it. If you want an example of this, you need look no farther up the road than Southwest Allen School District in Allen County, okay? About 1999, they were in a similar situation you're in. A lot of building, had a hard time keeping up, building schools, infrastructure was falling behind. So they decided to put a 3-year building moratorium on all new home construction and stopped immediately in 2000. What happened? Well, the developers all went north, and that's when Northwest Allen's growth started. And that's when you start seeing going up Route 3 off of 69, 427, all those roads. And they lifted the building moratorium, assuming their growth would come back in. It didn't. Migration flows like water. It follows a path of least resistance. And once it started going north, it stayed going north. Now, 25 years later, Northwest Allen is twice the size of Southwest Allen. In fact, Southwest Allen just decided to go to open enrollment because they don't have enough kids in it. There's an assumption, we do this, well, if we stop it, we'll just start right back up 3 years from now. You got, and I've done all these districts too, Hamilton Heights, Sheraton, South Tipton. They all ask, when's the growth from, going to come up from Westfield, Washington? Just like it is when you guys started. You started really growing really fast when Carmel built out, and they came north. Throw a building moratorium on here, they're going to be the recipients. So, yeah, it'll slow you. And then there's another, and we'll get on that later, different demographic variables. But if you throw a building moratorium up, it has a devastating impact on both your population and your enrollment forecasting. And the other two, and these are probably the most important ones, district will average 1,530 existing home sales per year, 650 new single-family homes. That's a little more than double. This is one of the highest rates you're going to see anywhere in the Midwest, maybe even the country. In most school districts, existing home sales outnumber new home sales by about a 9-to-1 margin. Some districts it's even smaller, than 20-to-1 margin. Northwest Allen's kind of your demographic twin. They're the only other district in the state that has this high proportion, close to a third or 40% of your housing market being new home construction. But you could build 1,000 homes in this district a year. If you don't sell any existing homes, your enrollment drops, okay? Now, I've got no problem thinking you're gonna hit the 650, although we've been tracking your building permits for about the last 8 years. And you just had 10 consecutive months of under 100 building permits, first time since 2000, before COVID. I still think you're going to hit 650 because you got enough in the pipeline for next year. That includes apartments too. What I'm worried about is that 1,530, because you're not seeing enough people with homes in the market. And this is the trend we're seeing all over the country. The elderly are just not putting their homes in the market. They stopped during COVID and haven't picked up. So that's Indiana, Midwest, South, West, Northeast, you name it, it's all going on right now. They're just, because they've got no place to go. We just never built a good, large number of diverse elder housing in this country, and they've got no place to move to. Might be sitting on a ton of equity, but what good is that when you got to take all of your existing equity and plus to get a retirement home someplace? So that's the number to track. We use Zillow, Realty Tracking, Realtor.com, gives it right down to the address level. I don't know if you'll make it next year, but that's the number I'm really going to start checking in May when we do our first evaluations. If you're going to have error in the forecast of normal any year to year, it's the interest rates, home construction, home sales, and the transfer rates are the 4 variables that have the highest probability of error. If there's going to be wrong, it's because of changes above or below the assumed numbers in those 4 assumptions. Building moratoriums are rare, so we just say if it does happen, it's like a yes or no. But the other 4, those are ones you really have to keep an eye on, particularly the home sales. And this is an example of the population forecast. We have one for each one of the attendance areas. I want to go to the population pyramids because the age distribution of your population, how it's distributed across the life course, is the #1 predictive variable for future population enrollment change. It's not births, it's not deaths, not migration, not home sales, not home building. How is your population distributed? I'm using Southwest Allen as an example, another suburban school district. It's pretty easy to read. That 0 to 4 bar, that's your preschool. That's your elementary, middle, high school. 20 to 34 years old, we refer to as family formation ages. 80% of all births occur to women between the ages of 20 and 34 years old. You could have a total fertility rate of 9. If you don't have women in prime childbearing age, you're not going to have any births. Notice how this area here has relatively few people, 20 to 34 years old, and a very small 0 to 4 bar. That's the reason for it. You don't come out of college and buy a house, you're in an apartment. Where are most of the apartments? In urban areas. Then you start your family. Most people don't want to raise their kids in an apartment, so then they move out to a house in the suburbs. 35 to 54 are the ages where most people have kids in school. If there's parents out here with kids in the school, the majority of them are going to be between the ages of 35 and 54 years old. Now, 55 to 69, and this is where it gets confusing for people, and this is probably the key point to carry away. So we call the empty nesters, okay? You've got the Smith family, lived down the road, been there for 20 years. 10 years ago, it was mom, dad, and 2 kids in school. But now, the kids have grown up, graduated high school, moved away. Parents are still there. Same house, same householder, same owners, But instead of 4 people per household, there's only 2, okay? That's going to be your fastest growing household type in the next 10 years, okay? It's also why we don't use the housing unit method for our population forecast. It doesn't have an out-migration component. It assumes household size stays the same. It's static. You have to look at the age structure. And then over 70 is what we call the turnover households. Elderly migration is broken into 2 categories, voluntary and involuntary. Voluntary, and that's one you hear about the most, usually 62 and older, up to about 72. Retired, still a 2-person household. They sell the house, move to Florida, Myrtle Beach, Alabama, Texas, wherever they go to, and everybody hears about that. They're voluntarily downsizing and moving, and the problem with that is it's only about 15% of elderly migration. Most elderly migration is involuntary. That's in the 70s. They don't move because they want to, they move because they have to. They either have a death of one of the spouses, or they both lose the ability to drive. Then they have to move. They can't take care of the house, too much space, no mobility. They're forced to put homes in the market. And this has become a key issue because we're through the voluntary migration stage for the baby boom. They're getting in the involuntary. So this is basically how you read this. We have 2 examples here for Westfield, Washington. This is 2010. And you see, again, this classic hourglass suburban pattern. You see this in virtually every suburban school district in the United States, okay? 0 to 4 deficit, elementary, middle, high school, much fewer apartments then than you have now, so very few people in the 20s. Here are the people moving out. Here's people in the 40s. Most of these probably came out last decade or the 90s, and then dropping off. So you've got a lot of parents with kids in the household, a little bit of empty nesting, very, very little turnover, comparatively speaking, and a lot of enrollment growth. If you jump forward to 2020, and that's what we based all of our enrollment forecasts, pop forecasts off of, and you go back and forth, you can see the growth rate, because the scales are the same, so a lot of, so a lot of people moving in. Here's the kids that moved in with them. Here's the people that moved in. These 30 to 34 were 10 years younger, so you can see what the growth rate was. So that's all that building you had last decade. But 2 things. Notice you still see a relative lack of people in their 20s because the vast majority of your homes are owner-occupied. Yes, you built a lot more apartments, particularly in the last 5 years, and if you do have kids in them, the vast majority of them are preschoolers, which is a good thing. See how this 0 to 4 bar is smaller than 5 to 9? That's what we call the birth deficit. When people see new homes being built or an existing home sold and a new household move in, they automatically want to just add it to what you already have. 100 families move in, they have 100 kids, add 100 kids to our enrollment. Doesn't work that way. If no one moved in from 20 to 25, no homes built, no homes sold, you just left to your own demographic devices, your elementary enrollment would have dropped by about 700 students, because that's how big your deficit was. Now, clearly it didn't, okay? You had lots of in-migration, you had home sales, you had homes being built, things like that. But the first 700 of that went into filling in this preschool deficit. And once you do that, you need 700 to break even, and then you have true growth on top of that. And I can tell you one thing from already from 2025, this deficit now is even bigger than it was in 2020. You need about 900 between now and 2030 just to break even, okay? Because you've got all of these high school seniors going to move out. Here's the in-migration, and clearly you can see from the data from 2010 to 2020, people in their late 20s, 30s, and early 40s moving in the school district. No argument there. But look how much you're seeing increase in the 50s and 60s categories. As I said earlier, empty nesting will be your fastest growing household type over the next 10 years. It's going to dwarf what you build in existing new homes and existing home sales because there's just so many of them. Even if you keep building at the same rate, it's still going to be the same way. It's you run faster to stay in the same place. It won't be until after 2035 that you start seeing significant numbers of these homeowners, particularly in the eastern part and the southeastern part of the school district, where most of these are concentrated, moving into the turnover ages, okay? So it's kind of a paradox if you think about it. Have more houses than you've ever had before. The problem is only a third of the households in the school district have school-age kids in them. Actually, only a third of them have kids at all in them. There's not a school district in the United States where households with school-age kids make up a majority. Last one was in Utah about 20 years ago. You know, I knew that was going to do that. Come back here.
It'll come back.
Stop that. Where's the tech
Hang
person?
on just a second, we'll come back.
There we go. Okay, so basically, again, go back and forth. There's a clear example of the growth, but not only how much growth, but what are the age brackets, okay? So, moving forward, what do we know? You've got, we're assuming 650 being built a year. We also break that down by where it's owner, renter, and price points too. There's a great rule in demography. You could have money, you could have kids, but you can't have both. Anybody who's a parent knows what I'm talking about. So as home price goes up, household size goes down, okay? Also, higher the education level, higher the income level, fewer kids too. So there's a lot of variables that go into this model building. But we can see right now that, you know, are we going to have enough home sales and enough new home construction to bring in households with preschoolers, not just elementary and middle school age kids, preschoolers, to fill in that deficit? We assume that at least to the end of the decade, at the rates that we've assumed in the forecast, yes, you'll be able to, okay? Now, there's talk of interest rates dropping, and they probably will after Jerome Powell gets thrown off the Federal Reserve. They'll probably cut rates by a point. They were 6.25 this morning. We might see down around 5 by the end of the year. That wouldn't surprise me. But the cut in interest rates alone is not going to be enough to restart the housing market. You're going to have to convince people to drop their home prices, which is much, much, much more difficult to do. We started to see a little bit of it throughout the country in the last couple months, but not enough to really move the needle on this. So I'm not too optimistic on the home prices being cut. You will see some relief on the interest rate front, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to really move the needle on this. And by God, I got this done in 20 minutes, so that's a record.
Go to the next slide, Gary.
Questions?
Yeah, go see what's on the next slide.
I'm sorry?
The next slide.
What about?
Yeah,
what about the next
hold the
slide?
questions.
That one?
Wait, this is, well, that's the
questions,
question.
yeah.
You want your slide?
Let me talk my slide first, and
Go
I
one
think
more.
then we
Go
should
one
take
more,
some
Jerry.
questions.
One more?
There you go.
There you
So-
go.
This is work that I started doing, I don't know, a couple of months ago after, John, you and I had our conversation. So I saw the numbers, the two numbers that the city, we can't control them, but we certainly can track them. One is sales of existing homes, which the bogey you guys gave us in your demographic study is, was it 1,530? And then the second one is existing home sales. When I took office 2 years ago, and I think the council will unanimously agree with this statement, we were very thoughtful in slowing down the pace of growth. Several reasons. One, we've heard the cries from the school of, hey, we got to slow down, you're crippling us, not necessarily the school, but certainly the community. We also had the issue of a comprehensive plan that was over 20 years old that, quite frankly, we had already been encroaching on or expanding beyond. And I committed we weren't going to allow any new developments outside the comprehensive plan until we had clarity and approval of that. That's getting ready to come to council the second meeting in January, and more information will start to leak out about that plan. So we went back and looked at the data, and what you're going to see is the last 2 years we've actually had record lows of new building permits issued in the city. Again, that's what we wanted, and we thought that was the right thing to do. When you look at these numbers, that green colored part of the graph is existing home sales. I can't control that. People either sell or they won't. That's up to them. But certainly it fits the narrative that the demographer was talking about, in that with interest rates, post-COVID, all the dynamics playing out, people just are not selling their homes. We have to hit that 1,530 mark. Last year in 2025, it was 854. So we're half of that, or not quite, a little over half of that number. Then the second number is the new construction homes, which that target is 650. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. We've actually been exceeding that, not by a lot. You're going to see that number coming down each year. Again, last year was a record low of 752. But I think what you're going to find is when you add those two together, you see very clearly a gap of almost 600 homes a year in our city. And that's a combination of existing home sales and new builds. And after talking to Dr. Atha and listening to the demographer speak, that obviously created some pause for me, because we've got 4 consecutive years now of way below a number that has to, that we need to hit to keep a stable environment for the schools. The other thing you need to understand too, and I'll let Dr. Atha talk to this and I'll hand it over to him to take it from here, but the schools have spent a lot of time and energy over the last several years coming up with a very thoughtful plan around growth. And they were using assumptions as well. And they're making investments, taxpayer dollars, into that growth, that strategy. New elementary schools, expanding the high school, a new middle school. So when they're accounting for a certain level of growth and the city is throttling down, that delta gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's where we get into a problem. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Atha, and the school board to say a few comments.
Well, so before we do that, Jerry, you can go back to the questions.
Okay.
Before we get too far away, or go back one slide up the other way, even though, here we go. So I want anybody especially, but it can be the Board of Trustees or from the City Council, if you have questions for Jerry, now's the time. You got him? He's,
Can I make one more point?
Yep.
I forgot this to the president, with your permission, Mayor Willis. How many people here have kids in the Westfield Washington School District? Okay, good. Good random sample of households with kids in the school. And to be fair, how many of you have preschoolers at home as well? Okay, good. About them. How many of you are going to have any more kids? Even more important, as soon as your last child graduates high school, how many are going to sell your house and leave the district? That's not enough. Thank you, because you just proved my point right there.
Two.
Half of you move
people.
away,
We
and
need a
half
few
of
more.
you have kids to really move the needle on this. So, thank you.
questions for Dr. McKibben?
Doctor, in regards to different home styles and types, do you see percentage or forecasting associated with apartments versus townhomes versus condos versus certain square footages of houses and levels of square footage of houses as an increase in cost?
Great question, because that's an underviewed variable. First thing we break down is we call housing tenure and demography. Owner versus renter have two completely different dynamics. Renters tend to be younger, and because they're younger, they tend to be poorer.
Can you stay close to the mic, because this is being live
Okay.
streamed as well.
Because poor are still in family formation ages, so they're still having kids, and they're more mobile. Renters move an average every 2 years. Homeowners, older, have usually finished their family formation, so their kids are either born or in preschool, and move an average every 12 years. Much more, moving on to 15 now. So, and then you got types. Apartments tend to have higher yields, and this, I think, what confuses people. They'll see an apartment complex down here, lots of kids, but the preschoolers, and when they age, are they going to age into the system? Well, probably not, because most people don't want to raise their kids in an apartment. So your new apartment you're building is good. You're no longer dependent upon apartments in surrounding school districts to migrate in. You just have to have them here, and move to someplace else in the district, which they may or may not do. And then on home style, again, it's price. You got a $600,000 home will yield you fewer kids than a $900,000 home. A $300,000 will be even more. Square footage tied into price as well. So there's a lot of variables you want to look at. Is it 55 plus? Well, you just don't put anything in there, you know. So you really do need to look at the individual type of housing, both tenure and price and somewhat style. Condos are kind of the middle ground. They really don't, they're more targeted for young professionals or people says, well, I can't get the house in the district right now, I'll move into a condo temporarily to get into the schools. Again, so you'll see kids come out of there, but again, a much more transient population than single-family detached homes.
I got a question about like existing home sales versus like new construction. Right now we're at like, it looks like about like 50%, like 50% are new homes, 50% are existing. But if interest rates stay the way they are and people are staying in their homes and we get to a point that we're almost double new home sales versus existing people selling their homes, that's almost the reverse of what you wanted to happen in our district, at least in this paper. Like what effect does that have on the school district?
I heard everything, but right before, what effect will that have? You need to get close to the microphone as well.
Yeah, so in the diagram, you have 752 homes, and or we do, the Westfield does.
Just go right to the question, heard everything else.
What effect does that have on our district if our sales are if the existing homes are
Running behind what I got?
Yeah.
I'm going to be too high. That's pure and simple. That's why we put those parameters in here. This is what needs to pass. Okay, if it doesn't pass, I'm going to be too high. If you sell 2,000 homes and build 1,000, I'm going to be too low.
So Jared, what does that do to our enrollment?
Oh, if I'm going to be too, oh, your enrollment will be way below what I forecasted.
way below.
Yeah, you need that number, you know, what's your break-even points? Total was 12. I'm thinking 1,800, again, depending on type and style. That's what you need to break even, okay? Let me go back to this slide here a second, because I cannot emphasize this point too quickly. It's here someplace. Okay, 2020 census. This trend right here, this 0 to 4, I cannot emphasize. That's 700 students in 2020. It's probably 900 students right now. You've got to have at least 1,500 to 1,700 to break even. If you don't, above that, you'll see some modest growth over the next 5 years. But you know, the whole thing about, you know, if you cut out any of that, you're not going to make it. You're going to wind up with dropping enrollment. And I'll go back to your demographic twin, Northwest Allen, who got hit worse on their how fewer being built, fewer being sold, exactly what Mayor Willis showed. They had their first enrollment decline in 20 years. You know, they too, just like this district, bringing on a new elementary and a new middle school for past growth, okay? But all talk of their 9th elementary school has evaporated since the fall numbers came out, because they now realize how dependent they are upon that building and existing home sales to do it. The only thing saving Northwest Allen right now is they have a higher proportion of homeowners over the age of 60 than you guys got. So they've got some, if that market starts to move a little bit, they might be able to bounce back a little bit. You don't have that luxury. The bulk of your homeowners are still in the 50s. They're 10, 15 years away from downsizing. Their big bulk is in the 60s already. They've got a prayer. So how many homes you need? God, conservatively, I say 1,500. More realistic, I say 1,700.
But it doesn't matter how you get there. It doesn't matter if they're existing homes or new homes.
It's got to be a combination of the both. You've got to have that much movement in your housing market. It really doesn't matter numerically whether they're new or existing. Okay. And distribution, again, I've been saying this for years, your problem in Westfield Washington is not growth, it's distribution. Okay, because all your empty nesting is south and east. Most of your new building is north and west. Okay, and that's very common in, you know, growing suburban school districts. Okay, because there's no empty nesting going out in the areas where they started building 10 years ago. They're all in their 40s.
Jerry, can you also, compared to when you say, we have young empty nesters, what are neighboring schools that have experienced growth? Where are they as you talk about that and you look at us versus them? As you said, when they build out, we started growing. So what's
Right.
that mean for us where they are as well with more existing homes?
In demographic terms, Westfield Washington's I'd say about 20 years behind Carmel, probably 15 behind Noblesville, about 10 years behind Hamilton Southeast. What's going on in those districts, you'll see, it's almost a roadmap of what you're looking for here. Noblesville is getting pretty well built out. They've got a different problem there because they've annexed into Wayne Township. Unfortunately, Wayne Township isn't part of their school district. So the city's showing all sorts of wonderful growth, not showing up in the school district. Hamlin Southeast, who just went to open enrollment, I don't know about the wisdom of that move, but they did it anyway, still has an undeveloped Wayne Township with really strong I-69 access. They may see a renaissance there as the building moves north. Some of that might spill over to Madison, I don't think so. They've improved US 31 dramatically, which used to be the second longest parking lot in this state until they dual laned it. Anybody who used to commute down to Indianapolis will agree with me on that one. But now it's a nice commuter route. You can just zip right through Carmel, okay? But Carmel's built out, okay? They're dealing with all sorts of empty nesting. That's why, if you remember a couple of years ago, why they closed the school in the east and built one in the west to handle that redistribution problem. Keep that in the back of your mind when you're making future decisions, okay? Wasn't they built a new school for growth, they built it for distribution. Two different issues there, okay? But they've built out, if you want to come north, and there's a problem I tell Tipton and the other districts, okay, most of the people who live up here don't work here. They work either south or in the city. You got to drive through a bunch of development to get to work, okay? So unless the jobs are in Carmel and Westfield, you got a really long commute, not only for you, but your spouse. So it tends to slow as it goes north. I really don't think it'll ever get to Tipton County. They think it will, but I don't. Some will go over to Hamilton Heights, some will go over to Sheraton. They're not too far off of 31, but those roads aren't in great shape anyway, but they really won't grow until you guys fill up or say you can't build here anymore. Zionsville, that's more tied into the Lebanon issue.
So
That's a whole different
would it be
dynamic.
fair to say then, just on what you told us, that, I'll point to Carmel, that they'll have more existing homes on the market in the next 5 to 10 years because they have more people in the upper of your pyramid
Yeah.
here? Is that true?
Oh, yeah, in Carmel now, their housing market literally is to the 90%, 10% level and dropping. I'll bet new home construction in Carmel School District is less than 10% of their housing market. They've already moved back the other direction then. And as the case with, if you go to the inner ring school districts in the suburbs of Chicago, you see the same phenomenon. The Lake County and North Side are going through the same thing right now. The ones that were built out first in the 70s and 80s are just almost completely out of elementary age kids. The ones north of there past Waukegan, they have yet to go through that. There's still some area up there. But it's so far away from the jobs in Chicago that the growth really slowed down. So it's proximity to the urban core area and the jobs is tied into this as well.
I want to make sure I understand something real quick. So this bogey that we have of 2,180 homes, doesn't matter if it's existing, doesn't matter if it's new construction, but the total number, does that number, because we've got Westfield Washington schools today, and in 2 years we'll have a new middle school, other construction projects going on. Is that number to address the growth the school needs for their growth plan and their strategy around construction? Or is that, as of today, the way we're built out as a school district?
As of today, the way things are right now, this is how it's supposed to be.
Wow.
Okay.
So you're saying this number is going to climb when a new middle school is built, new elementary schools are built, this number's going to, this gap's going to get even bigger?
Well, you got to remember, when we look at the enrollment side of this equation, you've already got a pretty substantial wave coming through your schools. As I think I told the board during their meeting, you're going to have 800 more kids in your high school by the end of the decade in 2035. Then if you stop all sales, they're already here.
Okay.
They're just aging in, okay? Your building today is not for future growth, it's to catch up with what you've had already. You know, and again, when we do redistricting and boundaries, we recommend somewhere around 90% capacity. You can't run a school 100%. Anybody who's run a school knows you can't have a kid in every seat in every classroom all day long. 90%, you know, bubbles, deficits, things like that. You'll have some variations. So that puts you in good shape. But your problem's actually for the growth is going to be in the high school, and it's already here.
So
That'd
this
be
number
big
is a true
concern.
number for us to look at. The numbers that we're showing, that 2,180 homes, that's a real number for us.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was trying to think.
That's a good number. That gives you modest growth, okay? But again, the gentleman brought the good point there was, you know, because the only thing I would say in that chart, there's a new construction, one for apartments and one for single-family detached, because they have two different dynamics. But the apartments will give you more growth farther down the line as the kids age in. The new home construction that are family, single-family detached, tends to be more immediate impact, but less.
Dr. McKibben, I got a question.
Hear a voice.
The empty nesters section here,
I'm sorry, yeah.
I think I'm on, yeah. So the empty nester section here, is that 55 to 69 years old?
Yeah.
Has there been any other communities in the state or across the country that you've seen that they have done to mitigate them staying put? Such as like 55 and older communities that might be smaller housing, lower price point, so on and so forth. Has there been anything that you've seen that has mitigated those people turning their houses over quicker instead of staying put?
I like that question too. One of my favorite stories, we've done Andover, Massachusetts for years, and the same argument up there, there's no elder housing, okay? So their city decided, fine, we're going to do just that. We're going to build some elder housing so they can, people here live here, like living here, can move into them, and their homes can now have new young families move in. Makes a lot of sense, right? Okay, so they did it. Problem is, there's such a shortage of elder housing, 90% of the people who moved in weren't from Andover. You know, it was wildly popular. Sold that thing out in like 3 weeks, but it was a shortage of it because you can't restrict it. Well, it's only Andover people that didn't want to go through the courts. So it would have to be almost a regional effort, a countywide effort to do that. You know, to have the premise is great. You know, I think it's a great idea. Build elder housing. You know, varied type, varied prices, varied sizes, different. You know, people always thought, oh, us elderly people, you know, one size fits all. We're as diverse as any other population. You know, household styles, mobility levels, health issues, employment, whatever the case may be. We need housing options that are just as diverse as the other population. I can't believe I just said we elderly. Strike that.
So I'll make a statement, and I'd be anxious to hear your thoughts on this. So since this group up here, and all of us are new in our positions, every single one of us in 2024, I believe, if my numbers are correct, we have approved 5 subdivisions since we took office. I can remember days when every month the city of Westfield was approving a new subdivision. We've done 5 in 24 months. 2 of those are retirement communities. Again, being purposeful not to impact the schools. And the other 3 are little infill projects of 20, 40, and I think 80 acres. So not producing a ton of new building permits each year. And I know you track everything we do, and you have been for a while. Do you expect on that chart I just showed you, even a steeper dip in the next couple of years because of really the lack of new housing that's been approved?
On a general view, I look at your permits to be running somewhere around 100 a month, which is far below what you've been averaging for the last couple, 3 years. And again, I'll go back to my key point. Permitting and building are two different things. All the building you've got right now was permitted back when you were talking about. So, and it could be 20 or 30 each way, but I'm not seeing any movement in the trend there. But go back to my point, the thing I'm really concerned about, I would be tracking your, and we do evaluations every year. I'll call up John in the fall, send me your fresh ADM data. We want to do an evaluation on these because I want to see how we're doing. And the first number I'm looking at is what was your home sales this summer? Because most people with kids move between April and August. That's your home buying season. And I better see, at least I'm hoping for the forecast, about 200, 250 a month during that main home selling period. That's what I'm looking for. And if it's not, then I'm looking for, I may be too high. Or they drop the interest rates, who knows, might just take off, people go nuts, they approve every loan in the world, 300, 400 a month, I should be too low. But that's the numbers I'm going to track for accuracy.
All right, is there any other questions from the council, Sir Kurt?
Is that mic on? Can you hear me? So to build on what Mayor Willis stated, when we took office, there was over 10,000 housing units that could be built. So even if we didn't approve anything the last 2 years and say 3.5 families per home, our population was going to increase by about 35,000. And we're projected to be around a population of 60,000 right now. And as Mayor Willis stated, we haven't approved a whole lot. And so that is going to have an impact on the school corporation. That's the important part of this meeting here today, is to find that balance moving forward on specifically what type of housing developments we approve. As the previous counselor said, about 55 and older communities, retirement communities, they're wildly popular in Westfield. They want to move here because their kids moved here. But at the same time, the graph that Mayor Willis shared earlier does not even include the 55 and older communities in those numbers. So if we continue to, approve condos and maybe townhomes or 55 and older, that's just going to negatively impact it that much quicker.
It's not going to have any impact at all.
Okay.
There may be some out there, but I don't know many 55-plus people that have kids. Now, what you have to be careful of there, and we saw this in South Carolina, 55 over, but, we'll let your kids come live with you or something. It depends on how restrictive it is. South Carolina is not restrictive on anything. They're still fighting nullification. But anyway, yours tend to be very strict up here, so you're going to have 55 plus and all that. The problem is most of the people moving into your 55-plus community aren't from Westfield. They're coming from outside of the district. Yeah. And but again, to go back to that point, again, go to that 2010 pyramid, and you can see right there, 45, 49, and that's now, they're in their early 60s. All these years of a really slow one. Is this bubble here, the first wave, these people that came out in the aughts and the late 90s, they're not even close to downsizing yet. Yeah. That was a lot of growth. And think about all the building you had last decade. That's a huge amount, okay? But look how much that deficit's grown, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I did a presentation to the superintendent's meeting last year and showed U.S. chart in Indiana, and every state in the country is like this. Births peaked in 2007 and 08. They've been dropping ever since. We've had 18, 19, 20 years of straight drop in births throughout most of the country. Well, another way to think of this, your high school seniors this year were born in 08. That was the peak of that. Your 2020, 21 cohorts, that's your kindergartners coming in. That gap, you got most school districts in the country, and most of your sending areas too, have big going out, small going in. That's why colleges are sweating right now. They've noticed, oh my God, we're going to have smaller freshman classes coming in for the next 15 years. That's why you'll probably also see at least 1, 2, 3 small colleges in this country close a year over the next 2 decades, because there's just not enough kids. Now they've cut off foreign students, they're really going to be a pickle. But elementaries, middle schools, high schools have been experiencing this for a decade now, and will continue to. And it's not so much a factor for Westfield Washington, but it will be for your sending areas. That's why we look at the demographic trends of the entire metropolitan area, because people who move in here, about 80% of them are from someplace else, metropolitan Indianapolis.
One last statement too, on the existing homes that are selling. You don't need to answer it, but a lot, I won't say a lot. I don't know the numbers of those that sell to out-of-state people or to individuals that turn those into Airbnb because of Grand Park. And those don't bring any housing or bring any students to our community. It's a small percentage, but that number has increased over the years as Grand Park's popularity has increased as well. I see houses weekly that are turning into Airbnbs in our community.
A timely observation, given the news today that there's a movement afoot now to ban large institutional investors from buying single-family detached homes, which I don't know if it's going to work or not, but it's a step in the right direction. As they said, corporations don't live in homes, people do. So, and it addresses that issue there, and I'm sure, I don't know if Airbnbs would be susceptible to that. They're more looking like, Blackstone and, the big equity companies trying to go in and buy up houses, because there has been an increase in homes being bought and then rented out, particularly in land areas is rampant with them. But it would help. It's a step in the right direction. I don't know if it's going to solve the problem, though.
I'm just going to respond to a couple of things, and I think Jerry, we're fortunate because we get to spend a lot of time with Jerry, so he's educated us over the years. But one of the things I think, and I'm talking enrollment, not population here, that you have to remember, he just finished a 10-year study. Over the life of that 10-year study, 77% of our students will graduate. So the kids he's counting. We always think about in-migration. We rarely think about out-migration. So in the next 10 years, we have to replace 77% of our students, right? And so again, the reason I was asking about Carmel is they don't have new homes. They're replacing with existing homes. They're older, they're older population is selling their homes.
Well put.
Young families move in with kiddos, and they replace them that way. The bogey's the bogey, however you do it. So that's what I think about when I look at his data. Then I started out, and I gave you a number, and this is what, I don't know if it worries me, but I think a lot about it. 60% of our taxpayers don't have kids in our schools. What Jerry just told us, and Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, over the next 10 years, that number is going to go up, and the number of parents in our schools is going to go down. Is that correct?
Yep. And to follow up on that point, your first grade cohort of 2031 is not even born yet.
And then what I'm going to say, and he asked some people, and some of you who said when your kids graduated, you're out of here. People that don't have kids in our schools, I love them, right? But they're not as invested. There's 2 reasons that we have great schools. 2. 1, we have great educators, great teachers in this district. 2, we have great parents who are involved and support. As that number changes, historically, school districts struggle, right? I can keep great teachers, but if I don't, as that community dynamic shifts, the support for your schools shifts, right? So what I'm saying to you is, I'm not the council, but a thriving school district has young families moving into it on a regular basis. That's how they stay thriving. They're supported by everybody else. And those who don't have kids in our schools, who pay taxes, and we appreciate you. And if you're above the age of 62, I think you can have a gold card, get into our games free and our activities, all that, because we want you involved. But we need young families working with our teachers. Our mission, right, like we exist to partner with parents. They are the first educators of their kids. We want them to choose us. And anyone who moves into Westfield, we welcome them, but we need them. And so as we look at the data, what I want in this collaboration is this thoughtful plan that continues to allow our community to thrive from the educational standpoint, right? That's why I look at this data. It's whether we're growing or not, we have a plan in place to handle that, right? This year, there was some contention. Building schools, there's a timing piece. You want your schools to be a little overcrowded in the last year because kids drive money, right? Everybody knows that, right? The money follows the kids. So I need a little them crowded, so when I open up the new schools, I have money to staff those schools, or we have money to staff those schools. So we're in that phase. We've been working on it for 4 years. We knew it was coming. And so next year, right, like we're going to have space and we'll be back. And so no matter what happens, we're going to monitor it. We're going to have a strategic facility plan. And if we grow, we'll respond to that. If we stay the same, we'll be okay. If we shrink, Jerry, what will we probably need to do? What do most schools do that lose enrollment?
Half my work right now is closing schools.
Closing schools or open enrollment.
Yep.
Right? Because I just said, kids bring the operational dollars. And so if you have classrooms, you want those classrooms filled because that's what we collect taxpayers' money to spend to educate kids. That's what we do. That's our business. And so, if that revenue drops, then we've got to make change. We got to cut programming, we got to close schools, or we got to find a way to get the revenue back.
And to close on that point, I mentioned, your 2031 cohort's not born yet. Of course, that's my job, is to figure out how many are going to be there, where they're going to be at. But I also have a piece of information now. Those households here who are still living in the district with kids, they're not going to come from there. I know that already. So that's why I want to look at where your empty nesters are going to be and staying put by home sales. I can just take that right out of the equation. So,
Jerry, you're working with hundreds of school districts right now. Worked with thousands over your career. This is not the first time you've seen this. These types of dynamics in your career, I would make the wild assumption, which I don't think is wild. We have challenges with whether it's affordability or obtainability, whatever term you want to use, to try to have that young family to move, almost happening all throughout Hamilton County, and I would argue in all high-growth suburbs throughout the country. What are some housing strategies that you've seen that piqued your interest as you look at different school districts? Unfortunately, half your work right now is closing or realigning schools, but have you seen anything? Because building a house at $350,000 is actually challenging when we have residential acreage now and the open market at $100,000 per acre.
the hardest part of my job is helping school districts deal with decisions that were made 15, 20, 25 years ago that seemed like a really good idea at the time that have now turned out to be really, really, really stupid. And number one is building placement, okay? Because you tend to put buildings where you need them right now, get a good deal in land, something like that. It may be in Cobb County, Georgia is a great example of that. They had growth out there 30 years ago, and they started 40 years ago, built all those elementary schools in the eastern part of the district, and then People moved in, filled the schools, and they aged out, and their growth moved to the west. So they wound up with all of these buildings in the east that were running at like 40% capacity and overcrowded schools in the west because they put them in the same area too close together, okay? Not nearly as bad, Carmel, okay? Where'd they start building first? East 31, put all their schools over there. Didn't put anything in the west. And then what happened? They wound up having to close the school in the east, build one in the west, again, not for growth, but for distribution. East Allen, Northwest Allen was going to do the same thing, so they started dropping enrollment. Penn Harris Madison, throughout this state, there's a legion of numbers, and it's growing from school districts that built schools in the wrong place, okay? And it will come back, and it'll get you in the end, okay? So that's, I think, the number one challenge to it. Two, this is the state of Indiana where, God knows what that legislature will come up with next to help public education. Was voucher. My guess is charters is going to be next. They'll expand that. Maybe control some of the virtual a little bit, but it has completely changed the dynamics of education in Indiana. And the number of closed school districts like you and Carmel are rapidly declining because that's how districts are now dealing with their changing demographic dynamics and trying to use that in the short-term method. Penn Harris Madison's been doing it for 15 years. I stood before their board in 2008 and said, given the current trends, and they were 15 years beyond where you guys were at, and I says, current trends hold, you're going to lose 1,000 students. So they decided to embrace open enrollment to fill in the gap. And lo and behold, 10 years later, their enrollment for the resident students was 10,000 over 1,000 lower, okay, because they just aged out and didn't build anything, So when it comes to future growth and building, I'm very much a moderate on this. I'm not all for rampant, someone comes in and wants to build 1,000 houses, let them build it. I'm not for shutting off either. I'm for controlled growth, okay? Don't say no to everything, but learn to say no to some things. That's very tricky, very tough to do politically, okay? You can't show favoritism, things like that. Second cousin's brother-in-law owns land out there, you approve it, can't do that, But you just can't come in, and I've seen this in the South, particularly in North Carolina, where they'll approve anything, and that's come back to haunt them. Schools there are just chronically overcrowded from all the building. There's just no controls at all. So I've seen the negatives of both sides. So I would say a good, moderate, controlled program for growth. And in your case, also distribution is just as important.
You mentioned too preschool age families, the need for young preschool age families.
Right.
Well, is that nature? And then also I think one of the questions that was asked was the possibility that maybe that family starts in an apartment while they're trying to get into, if you will, a house. Did I hear that right? I'm just trying to check what I heard.
Well, if you have apartments in here, you don't have to, again, rely on apartments outside the district for it. It makes it easier. They're more likely to stay in the same school district, okay? It's not as guaranteed as it used to be, but it's more possible for that to happen. But the problem is, even if you are successful in that, you're going from total fertility rates of 1.9 to 1.6 and dropping, so you're going to get less bang for the buck, so to speak, in each household because there's fewer kids in it. Average household size dropped about 90% of the school districts last decade, even the fast-growing ones. And again, another underappreciated variable, and household size continues to drop. Not as rapid as it did last decade, but still dropping. So having the apartments, I think, is a good idea because it's good for the district to have that more diversity and get rid of that, fertility age deficit, but it's not a guarantee is what I'm trying to say.
So birth rate overall has dropped across the country.
Oh, yeah.
Areas where you have higher education, higher income actually produces less kids, generally speaking, as well.
Yeah, and no one escapes that issue. Same thing with the cohort imbalance from '07 to the '20s. That's affecting everybody to a certain degree, and the drop in fertility rates. And it's across socioeconomic classes, race and ethnic categories, some stronger, some weaker, but it's a macro trend that no one's escaping. No group in the country is seeing their fertility rates increase over the last 5 years.
All right, any other questions from my side, or?
Patrick,
So, I know that you guys have seen this information repeatedly, so this isn't new to you, but do you have any other questions before we move on, or?
I was just going to say to that question, and Larry presents a lot. We have every December, there's a school finance seminar, and Larry DeBoer, who's a well-known economist from Purdue, speaks there, and he showed a graph this year about earnings in home ownership, and he, as good economists do, set the chart at 100 in 2020. And if you back up over the 15 years before that, earnings and the cost of home ownership went hand in hand. Since 2020 to right now, it's 132 in earnings, 155 in home. And he basically said you're never going to have happy consumers when earnings and home ownership don't go hand in hand.
Larry.
And so that's a bigger problem than Westfield is what I
No,
think
it
is
is.
what he said.
I've seen that chart. Larry reuses it a few times, so.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so.
All right, so let's move on, just real quickly, a final statement, then we'll move on to talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan. Look, folks, we've got, right now, 2 subdivisions in our pipeline. If they both pass, and they may or may not, I can't address these numbers overnight. We're not positioned right now to do an immediate shift. And quite frankly, we hear you, we want to support you, we want to be collaborative, but as he said, we don't want to just start slapping up homes to try to address a problem. I think that'd be a big mistake for us. We got one chance to do this right as we grow as a city. We want to be thoughtful in what we're doing. Also understand that when a new subdivision is built, it gets approved, it's 2 to 3 years before the first house is on the market, probably closer to 3. Also understand that if we approve, say, a 300 or 400 home subdivision, they're not building 400 homes in 12 months. They're building 20, 40, maybe 50 a year, depending on how many builders are part of that project. So this is a problem we're going to have to deal with for a while. But I do think, but
Well, I just want to know, so in the past couple of years that I've been here and working with Dr. Kaiser and others around that, when a new subdivision started building, right, we can go in and talk to them. They all have targets. They're going to tell you, when that first spec home goes up, they're going to tell you 2 to 3 homes a month. Here's what we're trying to do. So we listen to them, we know. And that's why we would know whether we need to shift some boundaries in the short term or not, and so forth. But as we approached this year, we kind of said we're not moving any because we knew we had the big move coming up. Mm-hmm. But as you have seen us shift things, we know, like, we plan and we can make decisions on that. But you're exactly right. Depending on how many homes, it's a multi-year build-out.
yeah, it is. It really
That,
is.
again, that we can deal with because those builders work with us and we get out in front of it.
Yeah. And I'll just wrap it up by saying, we want to be good partners and we want to be collaborative with you guys. And again, I think the important thing from this meeting is changing the narrative. I know I hear it. I know a council hears it. I know we have collaboratively discussed the same topic, and that is every time we build a neighborhood, we cringe about what it's doing to the schools. And we hear a lot of negativity around, oh, you're crushing our schools every time you pass a subdivision. That narrative has got to change because it's not helping the community, and it's certainly not helping our school district. Again, I commit to you, and I'm really confident my council feels the same way. We're not going to overreact to this data, but it is important that we listen, we digest it, and we be thoughtful in how we move forward. Now, I think that's a good segment into the next bullet point, which is the comprehensive plan. Again, that's going to be released here in a few weeks. Here's the good things about the comprehensive plan. First off, it has a vision for every blade of grass in Westfield Washington Township. Now, I will say up front, if you live on a blade of grass and you don't like what this new comprehensive plan says your blade of grass is going to be, don't worry. Do what you want to do. Don't sell your home. Don't redevelop. If you're a farmer, don't sell. We really don't care. What we do care about is having a vision for how this grows so that, one, the schools can react accordingly. They can now look at the map and say, we need to be thinking about land or elementary schools here. We need to be thinking about a transportation center there. It gives a roadmap for everybody to work from. It doesn't mean we're forcing people out of their homes. It doesn't mean we want to all of a sudden start building subdivisions in the northwest corner of our township. That makes no sense. But we do have to have a vision, folks, because if we don't have a plan of how we're moving forward, we're just going to stumble there, and we're all going to look back 100 years from now. Well, all of us here on the stage will be dead, but our grandkids are going to look back to us and say, this was bad, and it wasn't a thoughtful plan, and there are many communities in America you could go to and just scratch your head and say, this was done poorly, and we don't want to be that. This comprehensive plan's been worked on for about 18 months. I think the last numbers I saw a few weeks ago, over 6,500 residents and stakeholders in our community have participated. It's unprecedented in the city of Westfield to have that level of participation. And I'm really excited about getting that into the public sphere for dialogue and discussion. It's not perfect. I'm sure council's going to have their issues that they want to address, and that's great. But at the end of the day, I'm excited that we're finally going to have a roadmap that we can all work from. A couple other things I will say about this comprehensive plan. It's ironic that the demographer said we're aging very rapidly. Believe it or not, our REA, who's doing the comprehensive plan, came back and said we're the fastest aging city in Indiana. And that was also a shock to me. When you think of Westfield, I think of our schools, our families. That's why I came to Westfield. I'm sure it's why many of you came to Westfield. But, you know, the good thing is people want to live here and they're staying here. And we love that. We don't want our retirees leaving. But it has created some problems that we're aware of. Other people are seeing this, just not the demographer. So I think we can all rest assured that that data is pretty accurate. One other thing with the comprehensive plan, it's going to take us about 90 days to get through it. There'll still be public opportunities to weigh in. We want you to weigh in if you haven't had a chance. Please pay attention. Please attend city council or planning commission meetings. We want to get this right. You're going to hear a lot of conversation, though, and don't panic, but a lot of conversation around commercial properties. I talked about this when I ran for office. 90% of the city's revenue comes from residential homes. Folks, just like what's happening right now is not sustainable to them, that is not sustainable to us as a city. And if we see a major decline in home values like 2007 and 2008, the city of Westfield is in a really rough spot, and we're going to have to make some really tough decisions. So we have to balance that. So we're trying to be thoughtful in how over time, 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, we can balance that out more. Is it going to be 50-50? No, we don't want it that way, but it's got to be more than 10% too. So just food for thoughts. Council, I know many of you have been very active in this process as well. Would any of you like to weigh in before we open it up to the school board to ask questions of us? Okay, one other thing I will say, we gave the school a front seat on the bus for this comprehensive plan. Dr. Atha, when he was assistant superintendent, was leading the charge for the schools. He remains in that role. And every subcommittee, every steering committee that we have, the schools have a voice. I made that commitment when I took office that our schools were not going to be surprised or have a voice in how this city grows out. So I'm excited about what that means. I think it's a plan, again, it's not perfect, but I think it's a plan that complements what Dr. Atha is trying to do and his board's trying to do. So rest assured, this isn't a city forcing it on our school district. This was a very collaborative plan. It will remain that way in the coming years. Yep. So questions from you all?
I'll let Mike probably has one, but I just, from our perspective and my involvement, we appreciate the opportunity. Also, I think just even with Jerry, once we have that plan, I do have a question on if we have a timeline for the special census. Obviously, that will provide him with data that he can update the plan and see where we are. That's important. But in that build out of that, we know, it's a plan. It's not a commitment, if you will, or an obligation. It's a plan. What I learned is we could plot and say, okay, we know what's going here, and then with his numbers, he could say, you probably need a school or facility here. I just have to add this because there's a part in there that I believe, and Victor, correct me if I'm wrong, they're agri-hoods, or there's an agri-hood? So I have this dream of a barnyard Airbnb in that agri-hood where our kids can go and learn about that part, just like a science lab that's at Shamrock Springs or but there's all sorts of opportunities for us to collaborate as this plan, comes forward or moves forward and becomes a reality. But Mike, do you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys showing up and listening to all the things we hear and everything else going forward. So, I mean, I think if we're all hearing the same thing, we can take this city and schools in the same one direction. And I just appreciate everybody pulling in the same direction as far as making the nice things that we have in Westfield, the nice schools, and everything else. I know people sometimes complain about the taxes, but we have nice houses. We want nice things around here, be it schools or anything else as far as the public goes. So thank you for listening and showing up.
I was curious listening to Dr. McKibben talk about Airbnbs and wondering if there are things the city can do, not picking on Airbnbs in particular per se, but just as an example, to prevent the transient renters and or just companies owning where no children are going to permanently live. Can there be covenant restrictions or community restrictions put in place by the city to mitigate some of that, or is that just strictly on the developer of the
Well, there
property?
is, and it depends on what you're talking about. So Airbnbs, the state of Indiana is probably, and I think this is a good thing, but it has negative impacts as a result. Indiana is very, very pro-landowner rights, probably more so than most states. I think that probably culturally fits Indiana. We're
Sure.
very limited government, stay out of our lives, don't tell me what I do with my home. But the downside of that is Airbnbs. Carmel, many years ago, tried to fight Airbnbs. The state slapped them on the back of the hand. The state passed a law that says communities, cities cannot dictate what you can do with your home as it relates to Airbnbs. Fishers and Carmel followed in suit last year, I believe it was, passed a law around, or an ordinance around, how many homes can be rentals. Because we're finding a lot, when we try to do affordable housing in Westfield, it all turns into rentals. You don't have that ability to purchase and own something. We think they're going to get in trouble with that one this session or the next. Well, that's the signals we're getting from the State House. So we've taken a decision collectively as a leadership team that we're going to see how this plays out versus entering a battle that would cost a lot of legal fighting and costs associated with something we think the state's going to come back and say you can't do. However, since we took office, all of us, we have worked collaboratively. Any new neighborhood that comes in, for them to get it past the council, they have to put in the PUD. I think the number is it 10 or 20% we've been putting on that? 20%?
I think it's 10.
10%, only 10% of the homes can be used as rentals. I can't dictate that, but we can tell them very clearly, if you want this passed, you're probably going to need to do this. And then the bylaws require it. Now, full transparency, the residents can say, we don't like this, we want more rentals, and they can fight that once they take ownership of the HOA, and they can vote that down. But that's not the noise we're hearing from our residents. So we think, we've been doing that for a while, that is legally clean. So we're just taking a little bit different approach.
Yeah, Rebecca, just to touch on that, we have had an experience where a REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, has purchased where a builder had already had 6 units already sold, and a REIT came in and bought the whole thing in Westfield. We do have a high demand, and it is corporately owned, not necessarily. Airbnb's growth is not really driven by mom and pop Airbnb operators. Do we have those? Absolutely, and they're great. They're not the problem. But it's the REITs that own and purchase. They're nameless, faceless. Somebody up here has a short-term rental, they live here. It's a totally different experience. from that perspective as well. It is anticipated Carmel and Fishers will lose that lawsuit. It's constitutional, so Carmel and Fishers also has to pay legal fees. So that's a whole nother matter. But that's the piece where they did want to take proactive measure. It is tough. We also are probably the home of the largest driver of short-term rental demand with Grand Park, which is a great thing. But at the same time, it does generate those types of demands.
Anybody else from the council like to weigh in on that? Or?
Yeah, I'll add to that a little bit. Rebecca, that's a great point. I mean, with the Airbnbs, the biggest concern with our fire and police is how many people are in those facilities when they get called for an emergency situation. And they show up and there's 20 people in the garage sleeping, or 25, 30 people in the house of a house that should only have 3 bedrooms. So, or they get called to, maybe a party that's occurring because the residents are complaining about it, and they're not even from here. They're from Indianapolis or some other area of Indiana or wherever. And so that is the biggest concern. Those are things we have been looking at in regards to if we do put some type of restrictions on it, is putting restrictions on how many occupancy can be in the house, requiring fire inspections, things like that, annually, and making sure they have proper egress and those types of things as well. So one example I was aware of was a garage, and they had all the bunks in the garage, and the doors were all locked. So they had one go back through the house to get out. So that's highly concerning.
We've talked about doing at minimum a registry. Our fire department rolls up on a house, they know everything about that house. But if they don't know how many people are there, our fear, our collective fear, and I'm sure shared with everyone here in the crowd as well, the fire department responds appropriately, and there's a heck of a lot more people, and maybe 12-year-olds running around that are in pretty good danger.
Including our firefighters who are wandering through a burning building trying to find unidentified people. So, Victor, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just kind of echoing what was already mentioned about Airbnbs and rentals in general, because this has kind of been a topic close at heart when working through the process at Planning Commission and so forth, and is also what I've just seen over the last several years being involved with the Planning Commission. One of the projects that was referenced that unfortunately the builder, it was supposed to be really an affordable community. It was all townhomes. So we could have had a good product here on market. They decided to, it's right across from my neighborhood, so I was driving home one day and I saw for lease. And I'm like, what's going on here? Because that's not what it was supposed to be. So it was kind of like a little bit of a bait and switch, where then the builder sells the entire neighborhood, never had seen this before happen, and so now we have a brand new community be all rentals. So that's pretty frustrating. So lesson learned there. We have to be more forthcoming, of course, there. But then, yes, just to echo again, we're trying to be more proactive instead of reactive. So with I'm making sure before a project, a new development comes out of Planning Commission, it has those rental restrictions built in, because my neighborhood, we had to go through the process, and it's a tedious process of getting it, 80% voter turnout or whatever it is to add rental restrictions to the HOA. I've had conversations, I've seen a few in the crowd with similar neighborhoods that have had issues, and they have to go through that process. So it's kind of painstaking there, which is why we got to be proactive. But yes, to emphasize, the state's kind of put some handcuffs on us, and there's only so much that we can do with it.
Just to be clear, that housing development was approved before any of us got elected.
It was, yes.
So we learned that lesson, but it wasn't something that any of us did.
And the city is chock full of lessons learned from bad development, and that's reality, right? You don't know what you don't know, and there's only so much you can put in a legal document. We're learning every time we pass a development. We're getting smarter about it, and I could tell you all kinds of stories, but that's not what this meeting's for. But anybody else from the school board side? Or?
No, Centennial's trying to add the cap process to our HOA covenants, needing 20% more of the population of our neighborhood to say yes. Yeah.
It's a heavy
We just passed
lift.
that in our neighborhood. We reduced our cap because we were able to. One of them sold to a person, and so we did a vote, and I've got an idea on how to get people to vote. I'll tell
Great.
you after the meeting.
And I can tell you, on my side of the house, we've tried, just like we put pressure on the amount of rentals they allow, but also the amount of people that have to vote to change a bylaw, because these bylaws are set up oftentimes to benefit the developer, right? They're gonna be in there mostly, if it's a big development like a Centennial, it's a 15-year project. They want to protect their own interests. And then when they hand it over to the HOA, they can't get enough people organized to change anything. And it might have been appropriate at the time, it's not appropriate moving forward. So we've been talking to them about lowering that standard to make it a little easier, even if it's a trigger point after they hand it over, to make sure that residents truly can guide their community the way they want to do that. So.
I'll say this from a different perspective on the back end. In the legal world, I've represented a lot of different neighborhoods and drafted a lot of these restrictions for rentals for various HOAs across Hamilton County, and I've never got a call or never even came across somebody that was trying to remove one of those. So I think the way that, at least in my experience on the back end, everybody seems to want the restriction. So.
All right, so let's move on real quickly. I'll say a few words about collaboration, then I'll allow you to say a few words. And if anybody from either side want to weigh in, that'd be great as well. Again, Dr. Athey and I have been meeting routinely for quite some time over lunch to talk about challenges. Anytime I have a subdivision come before us, I'm giving him a heads up on what's coming, and we talk about it. But we need to do better. And one of the things from this process, the positive of that is we're going to start doing this more often. Not always in front of the public and everybody's here. I do believe every time your demographer comes, if he comes once a year, we need to be involved in that. Sure. You guys are well versed in it. We need to get caught up to that. But I do believe having a task force between these two bodies to meet routinely, just like Dr. Athey and I do. We don't control all the decisions on a lot of things, quite frankly. So having decision-making bodies weighing in and collaborating is something we're committed to as well. We've had some recent conversations about WYSI. We've got challenges there. If you got kids in sports, you know what I'm talking about. I don't need to talk about it here. But the city, the school, and WYSI are going to have to collaborate to figure out how do we get out of a mess that's been created over many, many years there. Infrastructure. School built a middle school in an area that didn't have water, didn't have great roads. There wasn't a lot of collaboration happening between the two bodies. Schools incurred a ton of costs. They built a transportation center. We need a transportation center. We didn't collaborate. I'll blame my side. I'm not going to point my fingers here, but the point is there's lots of opportunities for us to save taxpayers dollars and, quite frankly, to do business better. And so we've committed, we're going to start working on those problems together. And we don't have a complete roadmap on everything we're going to do, but I'm excited about it. I can't say enough how much I appreciate what you guys do. You guys, quite frankly, have been under fire more than probably our side of the house has been since COVID. I appreciate you guys being strong. I appreciate your leadership. It's not easy. It's a lonely island, is it not? And every decision you make, you're taking arrows from somebody. But I appreciate your dedication to our community and our kids. Anybody else from my side before I hand it over? Dr. Athey? Oh, go
Real
ahead.
quick, I do want to thank the school board. It is a thankless job, but at the same time, you are the reason why we grow. You are the reason why we attract families. I cannot agree more with Dr. Athey. It's involved parents and great educators in no particular order. And I will tell you as a parent, I've experienced it and continue to experience it, and I thank you for that.
I'll go ahead. I don't know if the board has anything, because then if. Nope. No, so I'll just kind of say, Scott and I do meet on a regular basis. We talk about a lot of things, but I also know that you have groups on the city council and you're meeting, and we have a finance committee. We have different committees with our board, and so there is opportunities to talk together. And as you said, right, like we're serving the same community, and our resources come from the same taxpayers, right? So we should work together. I don't know sometimes if, we can always save the taxpayers' money, but we can make sure that the dollars we are using, we're getting the best value out of those dollars, right? And that we're collaborating, whether it's on infrastructure things or facilities that we can share on our operation side. We just need to do to keep this momentum going, I think. And especially, I think the comprehensive plan will help with that. We're looking forward to the results of the special census. And then I think focusing on things like WYSI and what problems that exist there, or I can call those what opportunities they have for us to work together to meet the needs of our kiddos. Because again, you know, the more, just like that 77% of kids who will move through our district over the next 10 years, right? Youth sports are the same way. You need young families involved, and then they move on, and you need to backfill it to keep it going. So a strong infrastructure for youth sports is really important for the long-term success of it. And that's for any part of what we do. So that's why this collaboration is important, and just understanding the challenges the city council faces and the school board faces, and how we can work together to meet those challenges.
And I would say, and I truly mean it, I think what makes Westfield very special is the center point of our schools in the community. It really is a rallying cry. And I think when you think about youth sports, I mean, the community gets excited when Westfield's playing in a state football championship or a state golf championship. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens through a strong youth sports program. And, you know, the city's made some decisions over the years and promises that we didn't live up to, that you guys made decisions on that have set our youth sports behind. So we're committed to addressing that and being better partners there as well. So.
Well, and I would be remiss if I didn't also mention all those other areas we have as we sit in this auditorium, in our performing arts department, in our music department, and all the clubs and activities that we have going on, our culinary arts department, right? And so those things, where are there opportunities, again, to collaborate, to provide not only facilities, but our young people internship opportunities, our performance opportunities, so that they can, you know, chase and utilize their talents, chase their passion, and again, have them life ready when they walk across the stage at Grand Park Event Center and get their diploma.
Please don't move it out of Grand Park. I had to put that plug in there, but no pressure, school board. But, all right, is there any other comments before we adjourn this meeting? I really appreciate everybody being here. Hopefully it was informative. Hopefully it's a new day of discussion and a new direction for our city. But with that, any other comments? All right, I deem this meeting closed.